computer. All right, guys. Well, let's go ahead and get started this afternoon. And what we're going to talk about today, guys, is going to be the information about brokerage services form. This is the form that we need to be giving to our prospects. You guys laugh because I use the word suspects when I first meet somebody, but the first form we're supposed to give them is the information about brokerage services form. So I just want to paraphrase that form for you. Let me get it up on the screen here so you guys can see it. And basically what you're looking at with the IABS form is, again, very first sentence at the top tells you what's going on. Texas law requires all real estate licensees to give the following information about brokerage services to prospective buyers, tenants, sellers, and landlords, okay? So I don't have to give this to a prospect as soon as I meet them, okay? But I'm starting to develop a rapport, maybe the buyer, I'm starting to maybe start to pre-qualify them, things of that nature. That's when I'm going to use this form. Hi, Sylvia. Hi, Cookie. Oh, they're not waving back. Okay. Anyway, this is the form that we will use. And what you're looking at, guys, what I want to do right now is paraphrase it the way I would talk to a buyer out there. I'm not going to read every single line, obviously. Just like when I explain a contract, I don't go through it line by line. I pick out the highlights, okay? So let's get the dialogue started. Basically, Mr. and Mrs. prospective home buyer, prospective seller. This is the form required by the information that I provide you regarding how we as agents and brokers work with the general public. Okay, this does not mean that we decided to work together. This is the information I need to as to what's going on in the possible relationship between yourselves and my brokerage firm. Okay, and if you take a look at the top of the form, you will see. Let me do something here because I can hear them. Let me. I'm going to mute you, Sylvia, because I can hear you.
What?
Mute yourself because I can hear you.
How do I mute myself?
Hold on, up here at the top.
Sorry, Nora.
Up on your box. Here we go. Got you covered. All right. So anyway, Mr. and Mrs. Potential home buyer, here is the form that we use to explain to people how we work with the general public. As you'll notice, there are two types of real estate license holders. There are brokers. I'm not a broker. You might say if you're a salesperson, but I am a sales agent. You need to know that I am held accountable to a broker. So I've got someone that's backing me up. Here, the next 4 bullet points are basically by law, the 4 minimum duties required by a broker, okay? We have to put your interest above all others. We have to inform you of any material information that we have, and we're here to answer any questions that you might have. The other thing that we have to do is we have to treat everybody honestly and fairly. Going back up to point number 3 as well, not only do we have to give you answer any questions, but we also have to present you with any offers and counter offers that might pertain to your particular situation, either as a buyer or as a seller, okay? We go down the page, and what we'll look at now is we can represent you, and be aware there are agents out there that are working for the owner, okay? So if you're a buyer, you probably don't want to give a listing agent confidential information. Now, if you and I decide that we're going to work together, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, guess what? I will be your agent watching out for your interest. There is another big word here. This is something called intermediary. That simply means that you might be interested in purchasing one of the listings that our brokerage firm currently has. Okay, so all that means is both the buyer and the seller would be represented by the same brokerage firm. It might be one agent, typically it's 2 agents, but just be aware of that particular situation. Now, there is another situation that doesn't pop up very often, but here's what could happen if I'm not representing you as a buyer's agent. If we take a look at subagent, license holder is a subagent when aiding a buyer in a transaction without an agreement to represent them. And if we keep reading, what does it say, Mr. and Mrs. Owner, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer? The subagent can assist the buyer, doesn't represent the buyer, and has to place the interest of the owner first. So that's one other possibility. Both of the agents, even though they're from different companies, everybody works for the seller. This is why I, as your buyer's agent, I'd like to be hired as your buyer's agent. I'd like to have a buyer representation agreement with you where I work for you. You decide that I'm your agent and you work with me. Now I can put your interest above the seller. Mr. and Mrs. Homebuyer, does that sound like a fair way to do business? Okay. Wouldn't you rather be represented than not, and everybody working for the seller? Because that's what subagency is, and that's something that I think everybody wants to try to avoid typically. Okay, but that's another situation. The other thing that pops up is the state really looks kindly upon written agreements. Let's make sure there's no misunderstandings, and so everything that we do in our business is in writing. If you'll take a look, we've got the company information on the first line. My broker's name is on the next couple of lines, and you will see my contact information on the bottom line. So if I'm not doing my job, you know who to call, okay? And even the broker can't hide behind the company name. Mr. and Mrs. Prospect, okay? Do you have any questions on this particular form? Any questions from you guys here? Okay, pretty straightforward. Pretty straightforward. Okay, guys. And what I did was I just kind of paraphrased it very, very quickly. And basically, guys, this is the IABS form. Now, a couple of thoughts that might pop up. You might meet somebody that tells you this: I am not signing anything. So you know what? No harm, no foul. Let me just jot your name down here and the time and date. And I'll just keep this for my record showing I presented it to you. No problem, okay? And if you take a look at the form, Mr. and Mrs. Potential Home Buyer, guess what? It doesn't even require your autograph. Take a look at the bottom there. All it's asking for is what, guys? Initials. So this is not any kind of legally binding contract. This just lets you know that proofs to the state that I did provide you with this information. By the way, if you go to my website, you'll also find the same form there. It's required by the Texas Real Estate Commission. Any other questions, Mr. and Mrs. Home Buyer, Mr. and Mrs. Home Seller, okay? And again, we use this before we get into what, guys? Any real substantive, any real heavy-duty conversations, okay? So that's pretty straightforward there. So anyway, I'm going to go ahead and stop recording this at this point in time. And if I can figure out where it is, here we go. Let's go more. And let's, well, come on back. Let's stop